Okay, so we're now live. This is my show, Dive into World Building, and uh, I got the topic for this week from somebody who suggested last. I think it was Christian Steele who suggested it, and he was like, "What about killing your darlings?" And I was like, "Isn't that more of a writing topic?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, but actually, I can think of ways it applies to world building, so we're just gonna give it a shot and see how we go." um, And yeah, we got started late because I had a hard time getting people in, but that's okay because that happens sometimes. Um, so let's see. The way I understand killing your darlings is sort of like um, people are afraid of revising, and sometimes they'll feel very, very personally, emotionally attached to some piece of text that they've created, and then later they will be told to get rid of it, and they will feel really horrible about it. Um, it, to me, it seems as though, um, well, in my view, in terms of the revision question of killing your darlings, it seems like it's there are sort of two levels of revision. There's textual revision, and then there's structural revision. And structural revision is the harder one, where you're actually having to think about how your story's put together and everything that's gone into it on these multiple different layers. And this is the place where the most casualties tend to occur, because you're going to end up with something and you're going to go, oh, gee, well, structurally speaking, this whole scene doesn't belong here anymore. And then, of course, you had that special one-liner that the one guy or, whoever it was came up with, and it was your favorite one-liner in the whole book, and suddenly the whole scene doesn't exist. Um, so what do you do? I guess, structurally speaking, you sort of suck it up and kill the whole scene, and off you go. Um, but at the same time, it can be argued that if you really, really love a line, you can think about where it might fit in another context. I, I feel ambivalent about the whole thing about being prepared to kill your darlings. Um, I don't know. Let's see. The other thing that occurs to me when I think about this phrase is possibly what I would call self-indulgence. And I think when you're working in a world and you really, really love it, this is, I think, where it most applies to world building. When you really love this world and there's something about it that you really think is super cool, you'll tend to, or at least I know I will tend to, write interactions that really aren't super, super necessary to the plot, but which demonstrate one of my geeky favorite aspects of this world. And I'll be like, oh yeah, I've got to have these people interact in this way because, oh my gosh, look, he's interacting this way, and oh, it's because the world is so cool. And anyway, obviously, ideally, what you'd like to have is you would like to have those demonstrations of how geeky cool your world is fit perfectly into the structure and the plot and everything that's necessary for character and all of that. So again, it's about creating the structure around it to support the darling, as it were, rather than sort of going off into tangents and various things like that. I don't mean to. I'm not here to give a lecture. But what I will say, actually, I had another thought. Is I had the opportunity at the Nebula Awards to interview Sophia Samatar about Stranger in a Laundria, and one of the things she said, which I thought was the most interesting, was that she deliberately wrote the book to be full of rich things about this world that really weren't necessary to the plot. And I could totally tell, and it totally worked. So let's not say that, oh my gosh, you have to strip it all down to its bare bones and whatever, and it's got to be like this, this, or this, right? That book is as wonderful as it is because of the profusion and the richness, right? Um, so, yeah, thoughts that you guys have to share on anything?
Yeah, I like I like it when authors can really pull off those sort of immersive worlds and give tons of extraneous detail and make it all interesting. And I kind of don't agree that you have to strip everything but plot from a book.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
I think there's a tendency now to beginning writers, I think they have to get published. Um, but
That's a
it's
good
not
point.
necessarily so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it all depends. Um,
Hmm.
like for instance, right now I'm struggling with. I'm trying to pare down. Oh, I'm sorry. I got the phone real close to me. Sorry. I'm trying to pare down a lot of characters in my book because feedback one of the feedback my beta readers gave to me was that I have a lot of characters in the book, which is
Mm.
fine. You know, I can drop them all. But one of the things I was noticing as far as dropping them was that a lot of the characters I was dropping was a lot of POC characters,
Hmm.
and it was like, okay, how do I keep the diversity of color in my book without the same time like without dropping all the POC characters out.
Hmm.
And last week, one of the things that hit me was like, well, what if I have a one of the main characters. It's a character that's slowly becoming more and more. He was originally a secondary character, but now he's becoming more main. And the way I have him set up is he is currently he's currently Anglo-Saxon in the book. Can
Hmm.
I change him into a POC character?
Hmm.
And that started making me look at his background, and it's like, well, if I do that, that would make his background actually a lot more richer because
Yeah.
he's technically from a place that has a lot more diversity. Why can't I make him that? So
Right.
it looking it's not so much changing your darlings as how do I make that characteristic that I really find really cool, how do I carry that in the narrative without having to kill it, and coming up with
Hmm.
creative ways to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Um, I'm writing my notes. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it, a lot of it has to do with how we set up the structure, right, in the first place. But I agree. I agree on the, yeah, you want to have a profusion, but at the same time, you don't want to have so much that people are feeling overloaded. So, because too many characters was definitely my problem at the beginning. With my stories, like 20 characters in the first 5 pages. They were like, excuse me. you know, so, I still did, uh, I did get one story published that had 5 different point of view characters. Um,
Wow.
yeah. um, it was, it was in an anthology, and I liked how it came out, but at the same time, it was demanding. But on the other hand, I think that the one of the things that I did in order to support the point of view character, the number of point of view characters, was to make it very redundant. So the all of the characters appeared in each other's scenes, and so it wasn't like you were just jumping from one nation to another or one room to another, but that you would see these people in interaction, and then you would switch, and you would kind of the viewpoint would change the way that you saw the interaction in the next piece. And that kind of varying perspective is very valuable for me when I work, so I often have more than one point of view character. On the other hand, so here's an example of cutting out a viewpoint character that I did. I had this story called The Liars, which I had published in Analog, but when I was first writing it, I was trying to write it as if it were the previous story that I had written for Analog, which had the human point of view and the alien point of view, because I really love alien point of view, and it was really fun. But the problem was, and when I showed it to the beta readers, they were like, you know, people who don't understand what is going on with this point of view are going to be completely confused. And people who do understand what's going on with this point of view are going to have the end of the story spoiled for them, right? Because part of the whole story problem was, what the heck is going on in this alien's head, right? So because of the needs of the story, then what I did was I just basically said, okay, even though I love alien point of view, this is just not working. So I took her point of view out of the story and made her much more of a mystery, because it was really about understanding her and her viewpoint, and the humans had to struggle through that process. And so I felt the readers should probably struggle through that process as well alongside them. So I guess that would be eliminating a darling, because I do like alien point of view. But
Yeah, I'm currently editing an older novel of mine, and it's a book about a town kind of thing. So there's lots of multiple points of view, and I had to eliminate a lot of them, and then there was at least one scene had to be rewritten from a different character's point of view, because the character's point of view I was writing it from, that was her only point of view scene. So I kind of, like, when I wrote it, I didn't have an outline, so I just kind of did whatever. So I've had to pare back a lot, even taking out like the whole for that. But
well,
it's really shaping up.
I would say that there is some value in writing out all of those points of view and in exploring all of those things, because I guess it's what I would call an exploratory draft, where you're really trying to dig into things and see how far the rabbit hole goes, and you really want to get into it as far as you can. And there's a lot of value in exploratory drafts. So, you know, I guess one of the things that you can learn as you make one of those is what exactly it is that you care about most deeply, right? If you're going along in an exploratory draft and all of a sudden you discover this thing that you just love, don't say, well, this is an exploratory draft, so I have to kill it, because obviously I have to kill it just because I love it so much. I mean, I think that's one of the bad messages that comes out of killing your darlings, is that if you love it, it must mean that it doesn't belong somehow. So, you know, you can always change the focus of your book so that it focuses on the stuff that you really love. And that's very valuable. LaShawn, are you still there? I wonder if we lost her.
I think, or her phone froze.
And one of the other things you can do is, but
Oh no,
Oh.
it's an entire.
Uh-oh. She's going to have to try to get in again. Let me see if I can get her to come in again.
Sometimes on the phones I've noticed it's best if you can turn like the video off, because like they'll process the audio, but not always. Like,
Yeah.
can't maintain the video very well. Yeah, I don't think you have to cut everything you love, but I know like in a book that I wrote an immense
Hello.
on.
Yeah, here you are. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I dropped out.
No, that happens. We lost your audio there, and then I was like, LaShawn. But
Yeah,
Sorry.
the picture froze.
yeah, thanks for sticking with it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I actually have to get back to work in a few minutes, but I guess I'll finish my thought real
Yeah,
quick.
sure.
But yeah, so where did I drop off at?
We really didn't hear the thought, I'm afraid.
At all.
Oh no! Oh, sorry. So I was saying I have a supporting character that only shows up in 2 scenes in my novel, and because I'd written a couple of scenes from her, I realized that because she wasn't going to get any major field time in this book, I would have to take her out. But a lot of what she does, and she becomes more of a major figure in the next book. So what I can do is I can feature her from other people's point of view,
Yeah.
and sort of like as an introduction. And then that way, when the next book comes along, I can feature her more as a major player, and people would know who she is and figure out, oh, okay, this is someone we saw from last book, and it helps bring a good introduction to her. So postponing it rather than killing it is a good idea to do as well.
Yeah. Well, actually, I relate to that because I have a similar character who becomes really important later, but who's quite minor. But so one of the things that I did was I gave him something to do. Like I said, if he's going to be present in this book, he has to have a role that is important. And so I hooked him in to every possible place that I could within the main plot. And he doesn't actually do a heck of a lot for the main plot, but at the same time, he has a very important little contribution to make here and there. And so hopefully that will be enough support for his character that when later he shows back up, it'll be, oh yeah, it's that kid. Right?
Yeah.
It was partly because the book that I'm currently about to go on submission with, yikes, is a prequel to something to a trilogy that happens 30 years later. And so you kind of have to sort of work backwards, right? That you've got these characters in the trilogy that are going to be really important. You kind of want to sort of at least have them show up 30 years before. But 30 years before, this kid was 11. So his ability to influence the main plot is smaller than it would have otherwise been.
But it's groundwork. It's laying foundation.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Laying the foundation down and then stirring it up when the time is ready.
Yep.
So, and I have to go.
Oh, LaShawn, thank you so much for popping in. It was great to have you. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fun. Thanks.
Bye.
All right. See you later.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Good luck with your work. Awesome. Okay, so let me see if I can find the thought that I was trying to develop when LaShawn dropped out. Oh, yes. Okay, so Harry Potter. Harry Potter is the further you go along in those books, the more self-indulgent material there is.
I only got to the 4th one, so.
Okay, so they get longer and longer, and to some extent you can say maybe that's not fair to J.K. Rowling because, you know, uh, a lot
Go
of the
ahead.
material that
It's
she
not
puts
my
in is
golden
actually
path.
indulging everyone else's desire to just spend tons of time in this world, right? Because they love the world, they love all the details, they love all that stuff. So I guess one of the things I want to do is not really criticize her because she's done an amazing thing. And one of the things that makes her world fantastic is all the little day-to-day, funny, great little details, right? The other thing that she's doing with those details, though, is actually very important, is she's hiding clues. So, you know, details that you love that seem unimportant are not necessarily unnecessary. That sounded odd, but but if you are hiding clues, and J.K. Rowling often is, you have to hide them within an environment. And if every last little thing the protagonist notices is important, then gosh darn, as a reader, you're going to notice everything that character notices. Everything that gets put in is vital, then you're going to notice everything. So there's really a stylistic value in profusion because it can help you to hide things.
Yeah, that's true. I know I have a forever unfinished punk novel that was written in like a diary format, so it really delved into the day-to-day tedium of this character's life down to like finding food and trying to budget her money.
Yeah.
And it really was just sort of insanity, and that's probably, that's one of the reasons why it will remain forever unfinished. Is because just, I mean, it would need an entire reworking. It's ridiculous because it was so just the minutia.
Yes.
And I have no idea if anybody else would find that level of minutia interesting, and I'm not going to go back and work on it anyhow. It's done.
Yeah, I think that there's a certain degree to which I would say beginning writers tend to think that the question they need to be answering is, and then what happened? Which isn't really. I mean, and then what was the next important thing that happened? It is definitely, you know, or even the next relevant thing that happened.
Yeah.
Because you know, one of the things that I've found allows me to get my short stories shorter, which you know, which is a valuable thing to be able to do. If you, strangely enough, if you can write a short story that's 5,000 words long instead of one that's 10,000 words long, you will have a lot easier time selling it.
God, yes.
But one of the things that allows me to get a shorter story is a more intense focus on the most relevant and or important material. That, you know, if there is one interaction that is going to change something about what is happening, and create a very important piece of the puzzle that the people are trying to put together in the story, then I need to include it, you know, and I need to put enough information there that people aren't completely lost and going, where is this little snippet coming from, right?
Yeah.
Because the puzzle piece has to have edges and they have to be a shape or you don't know where it goes. But at the same time, increasing the closeness of the point of view and increasing the intensity and focusing in on just those interactions that create change and drive towards the end of the story shortens your story quite a lot.
Yeah, and I mean,
So,
sometimes I think that's harder in speculative fiction because there's so much, even in a short story, there's so much more world building that goes into the short story that you never see on page. But the temptation is you want everyone to know everything about the world, even if you can't, but you can't necessarily fit it all in, even though you're dying to.
right.
Because it's so interesting, and you came up with it, and you're so proud of yourself for being so smart.
Oh man, I know. And it's easy to lose the story in the world.
Yeah.
Um, and just geek out over the world forever and ever and ever. On the other hand, one of the things that you can do, and that I try to do quite often, is create a scene that so in short stories particularly, you can't spend a lot of time wandering around and exploring the world.
Yeah.
I have an article on my blog about this, basically, but I compare writing a short story world building to being inside a house and having to know everything that's in the house and having to have a view available each time somebody approaches a window,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But in a novel, you get to open the door and go outside,
Yeah.
and something has to be there, right? And the view is much more expansive, and you can see a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, creating world focal points can be very helpful. Sort of those windows, as it were. The one I'm thinking of right now is I had an artifact in my very first analog story. I wanted to illuminate more about the society of the gecko people and show how the main character felt about it. So he's going up in a shuttlecraft to talk to one of these aliens for the first time, and his father shows him this artifact, and it's sun armor. And the big deal about the sun armor is that everybody thought it was a metaphor, right? But actually it was a real thing. It's just something that these people don't use a lot because they don't often go out of the forest, right? The forest is their natural habitat, and they're happy with it. But when they want to go out in the desert, they're cold-blooded, so they can't get too much sun. So they wear the sun armor, so he gets a chance to examine it as he's going up in this shuttlecraft, and it's made of leather, and it's covered with white feathers. And basically the idea of this object was to show that these people have certain types of skills that they can create an artifact like this, that they have the intelligence to understand what's necessary for them to change environments. I also go into detail about, say, for example, that some of the tie-on thongs have been replaced. So this is a family heirloom of some variety that may have larger significance, and in fact, it ends up tying into the plot because, there are these special events in these people's lives that they need to there's a point in their lives when they have to go out and have an adventure before they can become adults. And so if they're going in a particular direction, the sun armor becomes quite critical. But it's not used for more than that, really, because they're naturally more confined to this environment. Anyway, the point of that whole description of this sun armor was that it creates a focal point for the world building and also for the plot. And so it does a lot of work towards creating a larger, more expansive vision, even though it seems very small and it only takes up a little bit of text.
Yeah.
And so as far as darlings are concerned, you know, if you come up with something that's such a great focal point and shows so much about the world building, it's worth keeping it there.
I would say there's a point where, I mean, it's not a darling, it's necessary, and I think sometimes people don't like beginning writers. Like, I know I beta read someone's, like, the first half or so of someone's young adult novel, and there was no description virtually of anything.
Mm-hmm.
I had the character practically existed in white space for like the first 10 or 15 pages, and I almost think that it was at some point somebody told this person, you've got too much description, just get to the characters. And I mean, I had no idea where she lived. I wasn't sure if it was an apartment, a house. I wasn't quite sure where. And so it's you're trying to picture things, and it's not until later when there's finally some description of this boarding school she goes to that you have sort of, okay, this is what things look like.
Mm-hmm.
But people are like, honestly, I'm a great defender of describe the weather. I like it. I think it informs where you are.
Well, I think that whatever you choose to include can be very, very valuable, and why not the weather, really?
Yeah.
If it's relevant to character points or mood points or a number of different things.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my point with the focal points is, let's say that you're doing a big structural rewrite and you suddenly discover that one of your main focal points has showed up in a scene that's going to get killed.
Mm-hmm.
It is worth doing the work to find a different spot for that focal point to occur, because if you can find a really effective focal point,
yeah,
those things are not easy to find.
Yeah.
Right? And you kind of have to say, hey, this is worth keeping. What other kind of context might I be able to fit it in to?
Yeah. Alternately, keep the scene for color. People often don't say that. I don't think
and also at the same time, there are ways to give people details that also will end up being relevant to the plot.
Yeah.
In my novel, I created this suit. Okay, it's a suit. It's something that the main character wears at a couple of occasions. And you might be like, it's a costume and you're spending time describing it. Why? Right? But one of the reasons why it's there is because it helps to characterize him. It helps to characterize his mom.
Mhm.
It helps to create a focal point for the conflict between them and his dad. Um, it also allows another character that he knows to show aspects of his character, right? You know, oh my gosh, and yet there is still another character.
Mhm.
So, you know, like the fact that he's wearing this suit that looks really different from what most people are wearing creates ripple patterns through that whole area of the story.
Mhm.
It affects people. You know, it's not just, oh, well, I'm spending unnecessary time describing his suit. Do you know what I'm saying? Because there are a lot of I hear a lot of discussions about stuff like, well, you know, only romances have fashion and whatever in them. You know,
I
fashion is often portrayed as something that's totally unnecessary, and yeah, okay, you might like it in a self-indulgent way, but you know, it's fashion,
well,
so.
I like clothes and I like descriptions of clothes. I guess
But I mean, in historical, it's so vital, isn't it?
yeah, and I mean I love costuming, I love fashion. I often, not all the time, but I describe my character's clothing and their hair. And I'm kind of a description junkie. I'm probably not the best person to be having this. Uh,
You
this
know, so
um,
it creates ripple effects. You know, he's going, oh, well, you know, I've got this new suit and it's really kind of cool and I'm going to wear it because my mom gave it to me and it was this innovative thing and I'm going to value her desire to innovate by
mhm,
wearing this. And it's also a deliberate sort of statement against my dad and what he stands for.
mhm,
And oh, by the way, you know, the head of the First Family Council is going to tell me that he admires my suit, right?
mhm,
This isn't the character, you know, saying, "Oh yeah, he's going to like my suit." No, but he ends up going in his suit to a meeting with this guy, and the guy's like, "Oh, that's a very nice suit. You know, makes you look very grown up," kind of thing.
yeah,
um, which is you know, like basically fashion is important because
it is.
it's one of the well, in this book, it's one of the only things that Taggart's mom can actually use to show her intellect and her power
Mhm,
because she's a very oppressed, confined person, and yet she creates these big stirs with just what she or her son are wearing, and they actually have ripple effects later through the whole society. She decides to take her servant's advice and wear gloves to a
mhm.
party, and then, you know, 3 days later, everybody starts coming down with this fever, and everybody suddenly starts wearing gloves. It's like, yeah, I started that.
Have
So
you done a fashion and world building?
exactly, exactly. So you know, and she has a whole set of dresses that are patterned after the sky, which, given that they live in an underground city, is also sort of a shocking thing to do. Oh my gosh, you've got dresses out of the sky. Yes, we shall have to do fashion, shan't we?
Yes. Yes, now that we completely segued. It's like the last 5 minutes. Yeah, I don't know.
I will put that on for July. That sounds like a good idea.
I'm trying to think of some more books that are like a lot of self-indulgent detail that I enjoyed. Um, there's like a lot of classics, like I read Jude the Obscure,
Hmm.
and there's tons and tons of description, but I'm not sure it's necessarily self-indulgent, but I mean there's like a lot more about like each town.
Yeah, I think self-indulgent is actually a. I should probably have not have used the word.
Yeah.
I was thinking of my gut impression when I was reading some of the passages from Harry Potter, where I was like, why is this in here? You know, um, but to be honest, I think that profusion of detail can be very, very valuable.
Yeah.
Um,
But I
and
think it's also that profusion that a lot of beta readers, if you have the wrong ones,
mm,
just are like, why is this here? It's too much description. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. And then
well, I think that if they cannot see the relevance, then they're more likely to ask you to get rid of it. So, part of the task of the writer is not just to include the detail, but also to show why it matters.
yeah.
And I think that, Jacqueline Carey in Kushiel Start has lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of detail.
Mhm.
But it's all really fun stuff.
Yeah.
Also, Sophia Samatar, her details are just marvelous, and the way she writes them is just marvelous. And so, you know, there are ways for this kind of stuff that seems perhaps like it's extra to just take on a life of its own and become a very rich texture for the whole book.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I would counsel people to think carefully on killing your darlings, because sometimes you do just want texture. Sometimes details are just fun and can exist for the sake of being fun.
mhm.
And then sometimes, yeah, oh my God, you front loaded this unto death. Um, you know, it's it's a balance, and it's hard,
Oh,
and
it's most definitely a balance.
we've all failed terribly at some point.
Well, and I think in fact that finding the criteria for relevance is really, really important.
Yeah.
Knowing as an author, um, knowing as an author why this matters, is really important. Because if you can say, I see this, this special thing that I love is important because,
Mhm.
if you have that knowledge in your heart, then it will be much easier for you to convey that importance to people subconsciously by the way that you write what you're writing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the conviction, your convictions as a writer will come through, um, subtly, right?
Yeah.
But you do have to ask yourself really tough questions about why it matters and what you're trying to do with it, and keeping those relevance criteria hooking back into the story is really, really important.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And sometimes if you have a darling, all you need to do is add a line or two to make it relevant.
mm-hmm.
So there's that option too, of instead of
Yeah,
cutting.
I'll call that creating structural support.
Yeah, just give it a little more reason to be there.
hmm
Um,
Well, it's
but
like what I was talking about with that character, where I said, "Uh-oh, I have to either get rid of him, the 11-year-old. I
yeah.
either had to get rid of him, or I had to deliberately make him more important."
Mhm.
Um, you know, and in his case, I decided that because he was so important in the later parts of the story, I was going to say, yes, I'm going to commit to this character, and I'm going to make sure that he has an important role to play.
Yeah.
Anyway, and here we are at the end of our time.
Okay. Cool.
So, Che, we made it! And,
Yeah.
hey, we had LaShawn come in for a few minutes, and that was great. So,
One more person.
thank you so much for being here and letting this hangout happen as opposed to not happen.
Well, thank you
And
for
yes,
hosting.
and for those people who are just watching the videos, we won't be meeting next week or the week after because I'm not going to be at home, which means that it's harder for me to do this, but I'm going to try to do some in July, so I'm hoping to come out with an announcement of topics in July, and one of the July topics will be fashion. Yay! So, thanks, Che. I'm going to go off the broadcast, all right?
Thank you. All right.
Wave to viewers. Bye.